All right, welcome to another episode of the Nootralize podcast. Today we are looking at the 5 most science-backed nootropics for improving mood in healthy humans. And if you want to know how we selected these 5 nootropics as the 5 ones that have the most science backing their efficacy and the ones that are also the most effective for improving mood, then you can find a link to a blog post describing our methodology in the description of this podcast. To quickly summarize it, we systematically went through 527 placebo-controlled studies on the effects of 127 nootropics. And based on all of this evidence, then we found the 5 most science-backed nootropics for improving mood in healthy humans. And the results are in. So let's start with number 1. This is the most science-backed nootropic out of all of the nootropics for mood in healthy humans. Panax Ginseng. And we've included 2 studies in our review of all of these 127 nootropics that observed the effects of Panax Ginseng on measures of mood. And in these 2 studies, there were 130 participants included in both the placebo group and the active treatment group. And overall, these studies found a small positive effect on mood from use of Panax Ginseng. And these studies also found that Panax Ginseng can have a small positive impact on nervousness, sociality, and stress, as well as mindfulness, actually, and also a minute positive impact on energy levels, focus, and intelligence. So there are some other benefits to using Panax Ginseng other than mood, of course, which was the prior effect of interest, the primary effect of interest as regards our topic of the podcast today. But are there any risks of using Panax Ginseng? Well, the legality of Panax Ginseng is pretty much not risky at all, because Panax Ginseng is legal to buy, possess, and use in the United States and Canada. We haven't gone through Sweden, Australia, the United Kingdom, or any other country and looked at the legality of Panax Ginseng currently. So just because we didn't include those countries in this statement that we're making here, that doesn't mean it's illegal there. Illegal with IL in the beginning. It just means that we haven't gone through those countries and looked, is Panax Ginseng legal? But for the United States and Canada, Panax Ginseng is legal. And there were also no side effects. No negative side effects were seen in any of the studies that we reviewed on Panax Ginseng. So to conclude, a large amount of evidence suggests that Panax Ginseng does have a small positive impact on mood. And it is also generally safe and legal. But how should you use Panax Ginseng if you want to self-experiment with this nootropic? Well, it is probably safer and more effective to use it in a manner that it was used in these studies that we've looked at, and studies in general, because researchers are often trying to figure out what the most effective dose is. So the doses and the durations of use that were used in the studies that we looked at are probably going to be useful information for you to base your decision as regards how long and how much you're going to use Panax Ginseng. And the durations and doses that Panax Ginseng was used for in these studies were 4,500 milligrams of non-extract powder daily for 2 weeks. So that's very important to note that it is a non-extract powder, so that you don't take 4,500 milligrams of extract powder, because then you're going to have way too much. For the extract powder, the doses used for acute effects in these studies were 200 and 400 milligrams. And for 1 week, so perhaps subchronic, you could call it, so a bit longer, not within the day, but still not chronic, like not long-term effects. 200 milligrams and 400 milligrams were used daily for 1 week as well. All right, let's move on to nootropic number 2 for improving mood in healthy humans. 4 studies have been reviewed on this nootropic, and 205 participants were included. The nootropic in question is Ashwagandha. And what these studies found was a small positive effect on mood from use of ashwagandha. And this evidence that we reviewed also suggests that ashwagandha can improve nervousness, has a small positive effect on nervousness. And other small positive effects that were seen were on mindfulness, sociality, focus, energy, and physical performance. There was also a minute positive effect from use of ashwagandha on memory, and a moderate positive effect, so a bit larger of an effect, on stress. And there was also a large effect, so a quite significant effect, like even practically, it could probably very much so help you with sleep. A large positive effect was seen in these studies from use of ashwagandha on sleep. But what are the risks of using ashwagandha? Well, there are some side effects that were seen in these studies. Less than 10% experienced joint pain, abdominal pain, muscle pain. Those 3 were seen in less than 10% of the participants in these studies. And it may very well be that these are just as frequent as in the placebo groups of the studies. So this doesn't necessarily mean that there are any active ingredients in ashwagandha that will lead to you experiencing these negative effects. But 10% of the participants in the ashwagandha groups of these studies experienced joint pain. Less than 10%, experienced joint pain, abdominal pain, and muscle pain. As for the legality of ashwagandha, it is illegal to buy, possess, and use in the United States, United Kingdom, Sweden, Canada, and Australia. So every country we've looked at, it is completely legal, usually sold as a dietary supplement. So to conclude, a large amount of evidence suggests that ashwagandha has a small positive impact on mood and is also generally safe and legal. How was ashwagandha used in the studies that we reviewed? Well, ashwagandha was not similar to Panax Ginseng in the way it was administered, whereas Panax Ginseng was administered mostly for acute effects, and one study looked at 1 week effects. Ashwagandha, on the other hand, was more so studied for its chronic effects and its long-term effects. So 1,000 milligram dosages were given daily for 2 weeks in one study. 600 milligram dosages were given daily for 12 weeks in another study. 240 milligram dosages were given daily for 8 weeks and 4 days in another study. And then in another study, for 8 weeks, participants were given either 250 milligrams of ashwagandha or 600 milligrams of ashwagandha. And then there were 2 more studies. One 8-week study in which 600 milligrams of ashwagandha were given daily to the participants. And then also the last study out of the ones we reviewed, which gave the researchers gave the participants in these studies 500 milligrams of ashwagandha daily for 12 weeks. And that, of course, is a lot more than 4 studies that I just read. But these studies include the dosage studies that I'm referring to, like the studies in which these dosages that I just told you about were used. Those studies are all of the studies that we reviewed on ashwagandha, not only the studies that looked at the effects of ashwagandha on mood. So there were 4 studies that looked at the effects of ashwagandha on mood, but a lot more that we reviewed on other effects of ashwagandha. Okay, number 3 out of 5 for improving mood in healthy humans. Nootropic number 3 is turmeric. And we've also included curcumin to be very clear under the name of turmeric. So when I mention turmeric in the future on this podcast, as regards our categorization within our reviews and in our application as well, over at nootralize.com, nootralize.com, where you can find a page for each of these nootropics and find the legality and science of each of these nootropics. On that page for turmeric, then, we've included curcumin, and we've also included curcumin in all of these articles that we're releasing on our reviews of these nootropics and their effects. So turmeric and curcumin. We've reviewed 3 studies on turmeric and curcumin on the effects of administering one of these on mood then. So 224 participants, in fact, were given either placebo or turmeric or curcumin. We included, as I've said several times now, curcumin and turmeric in the same title, the same nootropics, so to say. And overall, these studies found a minute positive effect on mood from the use of turmeric. So perhaps not a very significant in practical terms. Like if you use turmeric, it may not have a life-changing effect as regards your mood. But on the other hand, there is a large degree of individual variance as well as regards how people respond to nootropics. So you may be a person who responds very well to turmeric or curcumin, and therefore you may have a large mood boost from using any of these products. But the evidence that we have reviewed also does suggest that turmeric can improve nervousness, has a small benefit to levels of nervousness. The same goes for memory, small positive impacts on memory as well, and on physical performance, and on energy, and on sociality, and on mindfulness. There is also a minute positive impact on sleep and focus, and there's also a moderate positive impact, so a bit larger of an effect on learning from the use of turmeric or curcumin. But what are the risks of using any of these supplements? Well, less than 60% experience gastrointestinal complaints, so some form of stomach problem is quite usual. It's not uncommon. And less than 10% experience common cold symptoms, diarrhea, headache, abdominal pain, nausea, stomach discomfort, gastrointestinal muscle cramp, conjunctivitis, which is pink eyes due to inflammation. And that's the entire list of side effects, negative side effects that less than 10% of people experience from the use of turmeric. And as regards the legality of turmeric, it is illegal to buy, possess, and use in the United States, United Kingdom, Sweden, Canada, and Australia. So that's every country that we reviewed as well. And it's usually, as many of you probably know, a spice used for seasoning foods. And it's also pretty much all over the world available as a dietary supplement. So to conclude, a large amount of evidence suggests that turmeric has a minute positive impact on mood, and that it is also generally safe and legal. And how was turmeric used in these studies? Which will probably help you, hopefully, decide how you're going to use it if you want to, based on these benefits and the risks, self-experiment with it. Well, it was used in 150 milligram doses for acute effects in one study, also in 900 milligram doses for acute effects in another study, and in 400 milligram dosages daily for 8 weeks, and also in 2,000 milligram dosages daily for 12 weeks. And then in a very long study, so this is more looking at long-term chronic effects, 1,500 milligrams of turmeric was used, or perhaps it was curcumin for that study, I'm not entirely sure, daily for 1 year, 1 day and 6 hours, so essentially 1 year. So anywhere between 150 milligrams and 2,000 milligrams of curcumin, perhaps dependent on if you're combining it with like piperine, which has been shown in some studies to improve the bioavailability of turmeric and specifically curcumin, which may then lead to larger effects with a lower dose of curcumin. So anywhere between 150 milligrams and 2,000 milligrams of curcumin, depending on how you use it and what you use it with, is advisable. And the next nootropic for improving mood is sage, so salvia. And this is not the psychedelic salvia, to be very clear. This is Salvia officinalis, and Salvia lavandulifiolia is also included in this nootropic. So the essential oil or the extracts have been included in this nootropic. We reviewed 2 studies on the effects of sage on measures of mood. 162 participants were included in these studies, and overall the studies found a minute positive impact on mood from use of sage. So overall in the population, not a very large effect on mood. But perhaps if you consider that the risks are not large, then you may want to self-experiment with it, because it does indeed seem to have some impact on mood. And perhaps you're a person who responds particularly well. And the evidence that we reviewed also does suggest that sage can improve with a small positive effect, then nervousness, a reduction in nervousness, and also a small beneficial effect on sociality and learning. And then other than mood, then other minute positive effects that were seen as compared with placebo from use of sage was memory, energy, focus, stress, and intelligence, and mindfulness as well, actually. So several minute to small positive effects from use of sage compared with placebo. So it does seem that sage does have some beneficial effects over the population as a whole, and perhaps then as well for you as a self-experimenter. But what are the risks then? We've looked at the rewards. We gotta look at the risks as well. And I should mention that these risks and these negative side effects specifically that we've talked about for each of these nootropics today, they are only during the period of the study. So we don't actually have data on the long-term effects of nootropics in many instances. Perhaps turmeric could be speculated to be safe because it's been used for so long, and the same may go for sage and Panax Ginseng. There have been toxicity studies showing that there is no harm to any organs usually for most of these compounds if used well. So not using them in too high of dosages, and also not using them except if you do your research. Perhaps you can use some specific nootropics every day of your life. But doing your research on the risks more so than just listening to the side effects section of these nootropics that I'm telling you about here is advisable, especially if you're going to use them for a very long time. But the side effects seen in these studies on sage that we looked at were none. There were no negative side effects from the use of sage. And sage is also legal to buy, possess, and use in the United States and Canada. So to conclude, a large amount of evidence suggests that sage has a minute positive impact on mood and that it is also generally safe and legal. And the dosages that were used in these studies were 50 microliters of essential oil doses for acute effects. Actually, 50 microliters were used twice in 2 different trials in the same study. Quite special design in that study, I'd say. But 50 microliters were used in 2 groups in that same in that one study. And in that study, 25, 100, and 150 microliters of the essential oil used orally was also studied for acute effects. And in the other studies that we reviewed, all of them looked at the acute effects of sage as well, so within the same day, perhaps 1, 2.5, 4, 6 hours after use of the product in question. And the doses that were used in these other studies were for the extract, not the essential oil, so the extract of sage, either lavandellofiolia or officinalis, salvia, one of the two, those two. And the doses were 300 milligrams, 600 milligrams, 167 milligrams, 333 milligrams, 666 milligrams, 1,332 milligrams, 50 milligrams, and that's it. So a large span of different doses. Actually 50 milligrams and 1,332 milligrams were the extremes. So there's quite a large span as regards what doses you may want to experiment with to find the most effective dose for you. And a lot is actually unknown as regards what will be the most effective. There is a need for further research. And of course, that is a very cliche term that is used very often, but it is indeed true that we do need more research on who will respond to nootropics and how nootropics should be administered for maximum effectiveness with the least amount of risks involved. Moving on to nootropic number 5 out of 5 in the list of the 5 most science-backed nootropics for improving mood in healthy humans. The nootropic coming in at place number 5 is lemon balm. So Melissa officinalis. And we reviewed 2 studies on the effects of lemon balm on measures of mood. And 134 participants were included in these studies. Overall, these studies found a minute positive effect on mood from use of lemon balm. And these studies, this evidence that we reviewed also suggests that lemon balm can improve nervousness with a small positive effect, sociality with a small positive effect, stress, intelligence, and mindfulness. All of those 3 last ones, stress, intelligence, and mindfulness, with a minute positive effect from the use of lemon balm. But what are the risks of the use of lemon balm? How are you supposed to think about the benefits if you don't know the risks? Well, you can't really. You need to know the risks in order to make good decisions as regards the use of any nootropic, and that also goes for lemon balm. So the risks of lemon balm: side effects. No negative side effects were seen in any of the studies that we reviewed. And legality: lemon balm is legal to buy, possess, and use in the United States, United Kingdom, Sweden, Canada, and Australia. So that is every country that we've reviewed. So to conclude, lemon balm is generally safe and legal, and a large amount of evidence suggests that lemon balm has a minute positive impact on mood. And as I mentioned in the Panax Ginseng Nootropics section of this podcast, it is probably safer and more effective to use nootropics as they have been used in studies on humans, which is why we will now go through how these studies on lemon balm, how the researchers in the studies administered lemon balm to the participants. And all the studies looked at the acute effects, so within the same day, of administering lemon balm to the participants. So this may be useful for you if you want to use lemon balm to decide how much you're going to use and for how long. Within the same day is the only research of high quality that does exist, essentially. 4 groups, in fact, received 600 milligram doses for acute effects. So that's the most researched dose. And then there was also one group receiving 300 milligrams, one group receiving 900 milligrams, one group receiving 1,000 milligrams, and one group receiving 1,600 milligrams. And as I mentioned, no side effects were seen in any of these groups, any of these studies. So you may indeed conclude that it is safe to do a self-experiment with anywhere between 300 milligrams and 1,600 milligrams of lemon balm for acute cognitive enhancement effects, but specifically then for improving your mood. So to conclude this podcast, if you have the right mindset to nootropic use, which means being aware of the risks and how to avoid them, when you go into a self-experiment with a nootropic, then you're in a great position to benefit from cognitive enhancers. And to understand the effects of a nootropic, specifically for you, so what a nootropic has as regards its effects on you, it is very important to continuously test yourself, test your cognitive performance and your mood, your subjective mood. So test yourself, perhaps not for mood. But usually when you want to measure your cognitive performance, you should do it both subjectively and objectively. Mood is probably one of the only ones where you only want to measure it subjectively, because that's all that matters. All that matters. Getting a bit short on breath here. I've been talking a lot. So you usually want to measure your cognitive performance and your well-being, both subjectively and objectively. And in order to do this efficiently, the Nootralize web app can be of help. And as I mentioned in the beginning of this podcast episode, you can find the Nootralize web app over at nootralize.com. So that's nootralize.com. And thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Nootralize podcast. More top 5 most science-backed nootropics podcasts will be coming soon. So until next time, have a good week.